Imhotep, everybody. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer, and a historian. I am here in Detroit, Michigan, right in front of the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center, okay? And this is at 2 Woodward Avenue here in Detroit. So this is City Hall, but behind me you see the statue called the Spirit of Detroit, the Spirit of Detroit. So today is Monday, October 14th, 2019, and what many people know as historically as Columbus Day, but has become known in many states and many cities as Indigenous Peoples Day, okay? So today is Indigenous Peoples Day. So I'm here in front of the Spirit of Detroit, and there was an Indigenous Peoples Day ceremony that took place today. On the news, I saw it on WXYZ Channel 7 News, and I think this is the second year they've done that, either second or third year. It was on the news. They said it was supposed to take place 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., but it ended up taking place 12 to about an hour to 1:30, something like that. Okay, so they gave the wrong time. So I got down here and it was over. Okay, I talked to a sister that works at a news radio station here in Detroit, and I talked to her and she told me that they got the times mixed up. So I'm here broadcasting. All right, so the Indigenous Peoples Day celebration was supposed to be 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. today, but it actually started earlier, so I got here about 2 and it was over. So I wanted to do this broadcast to talk some about this history. All right. And Indigenous Peoples Day ceremonies are not just for Native Americans, even though a lot of people think they are just for Native Americans. It's also for African Americans, because when we understand our history, we understand that the first Americans were Africans. Okay, so if we look at the book by one of my friends, Dr. David Imhotep, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. All right, his book is backed up by 713 footnotes. It's backed up by archaeological evidence and 7 peer-reviewed articles, which is the height of academia. And this book documents the African presence in this country that today we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago, at least, and then also in South America, going back at least 56,000 years ago. And we're talking about the Khoisan. So the Khoisan come from Southern Africa. They have the oldest DNA on the planet. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world, and they were here in this land. In 2004, Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina, he made a discovery in Allendale County, South Carolina, and they found 13 different types of evidence, archaeological evidence, documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. So on page 14 of Dr. David Imhotep's book, he deals with this. And if you read any of my, you see any of my lectures, you see me talk about this. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites. So they found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. Okay, I basically have them memorized. They found 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. This is before the people who we call Native Americans even came into existence. Now, this is no disrespect to Native Americans. Those are our brothers and sisters, or as Dr. David Imhotep puts it, those are our children. The reason why is because Asians come to this land that we call the U.S. about 3000 BC. And the Africans and the Asians intermix, and they're offspring of who we call Native Americans. You're also going to have different groups of African people who were here, because we have been here continuously, at least 51,700 years. We're building mounds, pyramid mounds up and down the Mississippi River. There are about 1 million mounds in this land that we call the U.S., the contiguous United States. So I'm not talking about Hawaii and Alaska, even though there were African people there, like the Inuits in Alaska. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the contiguous United States, meaning connected, the landmass that's connected, okay? So we were all throughout this land. There were about 1 million mounds in this land. Today there are only about 100,000, okay? The early mound builders were African people. If you go to Wisconsin, there is a water park in Wisconsin called Wakanda. If you see my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther and showing how the film Black Panther relates to African history, African culture, African language, spiritual systems, etc., I talk about the Wakanda Water Park in Wisconsin. Wakanda is an ancient word. We find the word Wakanda in Native American languages like the Sioux Indian language and the Omaha Ponca Native American language. Wakanda means possessing secret powers. But Wakanda, we know, is a Bantu word. Bantu was a group of 500 African languages spoken in Southern Africa, spoken in East Africa like Kenya, spoken all the way going west like Cameroon, okay? So when we look at the word Kanda, K-A-N-D-A, Kanda is a Kikongo word, which means family, okay? In different African languages, you have the word Wakanda also, but we know it's a Bantu word. So Wakanda is an ancient word, but when we look at the Wakanda Water Park in Wisconsin, they have historical markers there that talk about the Indian mound builders. Okay, the Indian mound builders. Well, we know the early mound builders were Africans in this land. Cahokia in East Illinois, the S is silent. Cahokia in East Illinois is one of the largest, if not the largest, of those mounds that still exist. Okay, so the evidence is still there. We just have to understand the history. We don't understand this history. So when we have Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations, African people need to be there also. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but you have to understand a chronology of history of the last 50,000 years that leads to the transatlantic slave trade happening. So when we look at, this is 2019, the 400th year anniversary of August 20th, 1619 in Virginia. It wasn't Jamestown, it's basically Point Comfort near Hampton, Virginia. When those 29 Africans on that White Lion pirate ship, when they come into Point Comfort, they're exchanged for food and water and supplies. But this is not, even though that did happen, African people have been in this land going back tens of thousands of years. If we look at just the Spanish colonies, the Spanish were here in this land going back to 1513 with Juan Ponce de Leon, the Spanish conquistador coming into Florida. Juan Garrido, G-A-R-R-I-D-O, Juan Garrido was of African descent. He was with Juan Ponce de Leon. So that is probably the first African we know of by name. This is 1513. 1526, the Spanish, who were the second ones to get involved in the transatlantic slave trade, the Spanish are taking Africans into the territory we today call South Carolina. That's 93 years before Jamestown, Virginia, August 20th, 1619. So even though Virginia or Hampton, Virginia, Point Comfort, even though that did happen in Virginia, right? That's not the first time we came to this land. So many people mark that as the first time Africans came into the British colonies, the 13 British colonies. But we were here tens of thousands of years before that. So we have to understand a chronology of this history. Then we also have to understand that the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who take the teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, in the Nile Valley region of Africa. When they go into Europe in 711 AD, the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, because it wasn't Spain and Portugal then, they're taking the teachings into Europe, which brings Europe out of the Dark Ages. And when you understand this chronology and history, this is going to lead to the transatlantic slave trade happening, okay? The transatlantic slave trade is not something that just, since I'm talking about Indigenous Peoples Day, because when you read the first Americans were Africans documented evidence, you understand who the original Americans were. So I came down here for this. Yes, he said 1 to 3, but it ended early. Yeah. Press conference, yeah. So where is it taking place?
Must be right. I guess right there.
Yeah, because here, I talked to a sister from WWJ Radio. She said it's already over with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they gave the wrong time. It actually ended about 1:30. Because on the news, on Channel 7 News today, they said 1 to 3. So I live downtown, so I walked down here. It was already over with. So this is what was going on today, right? So let me read this to you. Council member Raquel Castaneda Lopez and the Detroit Indigenous Peoples Alliance, DIPA, present Indigenous Peoples Day, Spirit Plaza, which was right here, It's the Spirit of Detroit right behind me. October 14, 2019, 12 p.m. press conference, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. honoring Indigenous Peoples Day activities. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So you see, I ain't make this up, right? But we see more and more cities who are celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, what we have to understand about Columbus is that Columbus, when he set sail on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, August 3rd, 1492, Columbus goes on 4 voyages. He never comes to the land that we call the United States of America. He goes into the Bahamas. That's where he lands October 12, 1492. He called it San Salvador, which means Saint Savior. He said he named it after his Savior, Jesus the Christ, okay? But then he became a devil to the people and decimated the population. So you gotta read Dr. John Henry Clark's book. You gotta read Dr. Clark's book, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism. Because Dr. John Henry Clark, one of our great Grandmaster Scholar warriors, he talks about the relationship between Columbus and his 4 voyages and the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay? So, here.
All right, guys, I'll take care.
All right, take care, sister.
Yeah, you too.
Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism by Dr. John Henry Clark. Okay? Now, Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas was a bishop who traveled with Columbus on his voyages. Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas. And de las Casas kept a diary. And he talked about what happened on those voyages. That diary was turned into books. Okay? One of them was Tears of the Indians. And there were 2 books that de las Casas wrote that I read in college. Okay? And it's going to be Bartholomew de las Casas in about 1517 who goes to King Charles V. And he tells King Charles V that the Native American population, or who we quote unquote call Indians, they had suffered enough. Their populations have been decimated. And he suggests that the Spanish start to exclusively bring in and enslave African people. Okay? So then you're going to have the Asiento de Negro of about 1518, the Asiento. And the Asiento is issued by King Charles V, also called King Charles I. The Asiento is the license that the Spanish crown gave to other nations to supply Spanish colonies, Spanish territories with African slaves. That's the Asiento de Negros. Okay, A-S-I-E-N-T-O. We got to study the Asiento because there were policies put in place. There were laws, papal bulls, treaties, like the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas, where the Pope divides the non-Christian world between Spain and Portugal and sends Spain and Portugal out to conquer the non-Christian world. Because the Spanish and the Portuguese who have been fighting, they were fighting and killing each other over these new lands that were being conquered, okay, and the mineral wealth and the resources. Because Europe is coming out of the Dark Ages. The bubonic plague had caused Europe to lose 1/4 to 1/3 of the population, somewhere between 25 million and 75 million people. The bubonic plague, the Black Death, hits in 1347, and it hits in spurts from 1347 to 1400. So, as Dr. John Henry Clark teaches us, Europe was land poor, people poor, and resource poor. And they're going out in search not just for spices and gold and silver and things like this, resources to rebuild Europe, but they're also looking for another source of sugar. This is one of the things Columbus was looking for. So when you see lectures from one of my teachers, Professor Kabahaya Kamene, who you see in the Hidden Colors documentaries, along with Professor James Small and Dr. Leonard Jeffries, they're all in Hidden Colors 5, the Art of Black Warfare, from the record Tariq Nasheed. When you see Professor Kaba in interviews I do with him, and you see lectures, he talks about how the Moors introduced sugar into Europe, and a lot of Europeans got hooked on sugar. So sugar comes from sugar cane. Sugar cane grows in warm climates, tropical areas. So Haiti, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Jamaica, those climates were prime climates to grow sugar cane. So this is what they're going to do. Okay, and the sugarcane plantations were very brutal, and the life expectancy on them was only maybe about 5 to 7 years. So you needed a large supply of Africans to keep this whole thing going, just the production of sugarcane. Okay, so we have to understand how all this history and the production of these crops and things like this is interrelated, interconnected. This is before cotton becomes king. Before that, it was sugar cane or sugar that was king. Okay, so we have to understand this history. So when we talk about Indigenous Peoples Day, all this history ties into us. Now, Columbus never came to this land that we call the United States of America. The closest Columbus comes here is Cuba, which is about 90 miles away. All right. But Columbus helps to lay the foundation for slavery, racism, capitalism, the exploitation of indigenous people, okay? And he helps to spread the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, so Columbus, when we deal with the transatlantic slave trade and we understand this chronologically, Columbus is crucial to understanding that history, even though the transatlantic slave trade goes back to the Portuguese right about 1440 or 1441. The Portuguese were the first ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade. The Spanish are right behind them. When you look at where Spain and Portugal are geographically, they're right next to each other and they're right above Morocco. And we know it's the African Moors going through Morocco into the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD. And they're going to go all throughout Europe. Spain, Portugal, Italy, France. They're going to Czechoslovakia. They're going to England, Austria, Germany. They go all throughout Europe and change the complexion in many of these European countries, especially Spain and Portugal, as well as Sicily and Crete, change the complexion because these Africans, especially the African men, the Moorish men, and women also, because you're going to have them intermix with the European population, change the complexion, and then you have biracial, you're going to have what we call today biracial people, okay, and they're going to then intermix as well. So when we look at King George III, right, who's the king of Great Britain, his wife, Queen Charlotte Sophia, this is the king who the 13 British colonies are separating from and fighting against during the American Revolutionary War, which starts 1775. His wife, Queen Charlotte Sophia, was of African Moorish ancestry on her mother's side. Okay, so there's a book that came out recently about Queen Charlotte Sophia. There've been a number of articles written about her. And the Washington Post had an article in May, around May of 2017 or so, when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry. And people were asking, well, is Meghan Markle going to be the first English royalty of biracial ancestry? So they have an article that talks about Meghan Markle, but talks about Queen Charlotte Sophia and her history, because she was of biracial ancestry as well. Okay? All right, so all this ties right back into our history. Okay, all this ties right back into our history. So there was an article from New York Times, okay, that talks about Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, depends upon where you are. All right, so read this article also, and it talks about how since 2015, several council members in the District of Columbia have attempted to rename Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. Okay, on 4 different occasions, the measure petered out and died. This year, Council Member David Grosso tied a new approach, introducing emergency legislation and undermining the control of the chairman. That approach worked. A majority approved the measure, and the mayor signed the bill on Friday, conveniently in time to be effective for Monday, October 14th, which will be officially known as Indigenous Peoples Day in the District of Columbia. The development comes in a year when at least 5 states and numerous cities and towns have joined a long list of localities that have already moved to formally recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. Okay, so there have been dozens of cities that have done this. I think it's over 30 now. And I saw an article from WXYZ Channel 7 in Detroit. I saw an article came out in the last couple of days that talks about how a state senator has introduced a bill to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day statewide, and there are already 7 states that recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, Columbus Day is positioned as a federal holiday, meaning most banks are closed and federal government workers get a paid break stance, but the latest moves add even more variety to how local and state governments approach the day. In some cases, one holiday may be replaced, one holiday has replaced another. In other cases, the two will be recognized simultaneously. Okay, there has been little consistency in using. Okay, so skip over some of that. They talk about a number of cities. I've been following this. They talk about a number of cities and states who have adopted Indigenous Peoples Day. One town, so they talk about Maine and Vermont, which has passed a law this year renaming Columbus Day, and now the only New England states, and Maine and Vermont, which passed a law this year renaming Columbus Day, are now the only New England states to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. Wisconsin, the state will recognize Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day simultaneously. We look at Dallas, okay. Local Native American leaders say a resolution signals progress, but was watered down. The Dallas City Council passed a resolution recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day, but Native American leaders who fought for it said it was whitewashed in the process. The final resolution eliminated a line that said honoring Columbus Day promoted intolerance. So a lot of people are saying honoring Columbus, who was a mass murderer, who inflicted genocide upon Native American people as well as African people. A lot of people are saying honoring Columbus is honoring a mass murderer, and they are correct. Okay? Not only that, Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America. So that somewhere down here in downtown Detroit, there's a statue of, there's a bust of Columbus. Okay? He never came to this land, so why you have a statue? But that, you had the Italian population who was really pushing for the celebration of Columbus Day and things like this, honoring Columbus, okay? And I think that even now, some of them, even though they still push it, I think even now some of them realize, well, maybe that wasn't historically accurate to do that, okay? Maybe that was a little insensitive to do that also, all right? I think some of them, not all of them, I think some of them, as people mature and learn more about history, I think some of them have come to realize that. Maybe you may want to celebrate that, but maybe everybody else may not want to celebrate Columbus, okay? New Mexico and beyond, Alexandria, Virginia also demands an end to indigenous sports mascots. However, Americans decide to spend the second Monday in October, the fact that they are actively engaging with history is positive, said Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. I agree with that, okay? She's a historian and author. Let me check the camera. Said Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. She's a historian and author, okay, of the book An Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. Along with the importance of honoring the nation's often overlooked indigenous past, she says she understands the importance of honoring Italians, okay? She says, but she asks, why not have Leonardo da Vinci, not a genocidal colonizer? Okay, I agree. So when we talk about this, it's not talking about erasing. When we talk about Indigenous Peoples Day, just so people understand, it's not talking about erasing historical contributions that Italians have made to this country. Because people of all different ethnic groups and races have made contributions to this country, okay? But Christopher Columbus never came to this land we call the United States of America. And where he went, he brought genocide, okay? And the destruction of indigenous people, African people, Native Americans, etc. And they brought slavery. So we're talking about honoring a master of genocide. All right, so check out this article here from the New York Times. And more, I think it's really about over 30 cities now nationwide and 7 states honor Indigenous Peoples Day in some shape or fashion, okay? New York Times published October 13, 2019, updated October 14, 2019. Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day depends where you are. In the past year, at least 5 states and numerous cities and towns have joined a list of places to formally recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. So if there's an Indigenous Peoples Day celebration in your community, African Americans need to be there. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened. Yes, it did. But we were here for tens of thousands of years before it happened. Also, you had various groups of black, what are called black Indians, like Algonquins. You have black Indians. Now, what's going to happen is when European settlers come here, a lot of groups of African people that were here, a lot of them get reclassified as Native Americans. Okay, this is something that Dr. David Imhotep breaks down in The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, as well as other scholars. So we have to understand this history, okay? So if you like this information, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, okay? You can support the African History Network. All of my DVD lectures are there, including my latest presentations dealing with Black Migration 1619 to 2019, as well as my presentations dealing with the film Black Panther, 6 Principles of Political Self-Defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. You can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button. That helps us keep doing the research, pay the bills, pay for equipment, things like this. Hopefully I don't have to buy another camera. I just bought this one. It fell over twice. Helps cover expenses also, like when I have to travel out of town to speak at different events, etc. Okay? All right, follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. Follow us on Facebook, The African History Network, Instagram, Michael Imhotep, and Twitter, The AHN Show. All right, hey, I got to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you become about yourself. What you become about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Everything. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for the online history classes that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history. I teach 2 online history classes, Saturdays 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. and Sundays 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Saturdays is Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And then on Sundays, Black resistance movements, from Christopher Columbus to the Haitian Revolution and the Black Power movement, 1492 to 1968. So we have classes coming up this weekend. Classes on sale, $80. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. We have a bundle pack of courses. You can register for both classes also. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. Even after the course is over with, you still have access to the full class. You can go back and watch it anytime. And then Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding transatlantic slave trade. That meets this weekend also. You can we have the course outline here that you can download as well. So it gives you a lesson plan for each class session. There's about 100 articles that we reference. The first class is about 200 slides, 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of the books to follow along in class. Click right here to download the lesson plan also, okay? I show you the, it's a very visual class, so I show you the excerpts of the books right on the screen, all right? Okay, so the content is PG-13. You can use this with your children as well. I don't do a lot of cursing. It's not overly vulgar or anything like that. It's nothing like that.